when people get injured and doctors or specialists tell them to take bed rest, I think it's very irresponsible advice. You put a 60-year-old man in a bed for 3 days, you've already taken 10 days away from his life.
Why do so many of us stop moving after our 20s when movement is what the human body was designed for? Welcome to Brighter 100 from Longeny, the podcast where we explore the science and stories shaping the future of health and well-being. I'm your host, Anil K.C, and today we are joined by someone who has been at the forefront of building a culture of movement in India. Ranadeep Moitra was the first Indian to earn a CSCS certification, and since then, he has served as a fitness coach to the Indian cricket team, as well as worked with the national golf squad as a biomechanics expert. Today, he runs Endorphins, India's leading corrective exercise studio, helping people from athletes to everyday professionals discover strength, balance, and resilience. We will explore why India struggles with physical literacy, what different kinds of training really mean, how to prevent injuries, and how movement is central to health span and longevity. Ranadeep, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Let's begin with the most basic, but often the most misunderstood question. What is fitness?
Well, when we talk about fitness, and in a general way, which applies to large section of the population, we look at certain parameters. Typically and traditionally, we've actually categorized it. Identified 5 parameters, and by which both quantitatively and qualitatively we measure a person's fitness. And you must have heard of this. Number 1, cardiovascular endurance. That's the ability of the heart to function effectively and pump blood to the muscles that need it. Muscular endurance, the ability of your muscles to carry you through a whole day's of work or what you need to do without tiring, without fatiguing. Muscular strength, extremely important, which we'll get into later on in the show. Flexibility and mobility, a range of motion around the joint becomes very important, not only in sports, but also in normal life. And finally, body composition, which relates to how much body fat percentage you're carrying in relation to lean weight. So these 5 parameters really add up to describe your fitness levels. In a very general way, when we talk about a fit person would score highly in all or almost all of these 5 parameters.
People often confuse it with, looking good, being slim, or lifting heavy. So I think for a layperson, what would it be in a simple terminology? How would you define fitness, saying that, hey, this is what really fitness is? Would you say that all these parameters play a part, or is something more important than the other?
I wouldn't. Each one has its place, but without actually singling out any of these, you'd find if a person was generally fit and being able to kind of carry on his or her daily activities or the needs of their profession, their life, you'd find that they would have these parameters, they would have these properties in some measure or the other. We probably don't look at them in the sense that, oh, hang on, let me find out what your flexibility is like, what's your strength like. But they would, in a general way, represent positive figures in all of these parameters. Some a little more, some less, and they would be probably aware of it. Or if they're not, it's for the professional to make them aware of it. But all these add up to health, longevity, and the ability to carry on your daily activities, the needs of your profession, your daily life effectively. But personally speaking, and that is from my experience of 20 years of clinical exercise, I find that muscular strength is the mother of all these parameters. In terms of its impact on metabolic health, its impact on longevity, its impact on just ability to carry on your daily activities without being compromised in any way. I think strength is the real mother quality. Not to say that the others are not important, but it's just from my experience, I find even where injury prevention is concerned or degeneration is concerned, which we all tend to face as we age, strength is far more important than mobility. It's a bit of a sweeping statement, but it's something that I've picked up from my years of clinical and therapeutic exercise.
You were India's first CSCS certified coach back in 2005. at a time when hardly anyone knew about strength and conditioning. What made
True.
you take this
Yes,
path?
yes. I have actually made inroads into sport, and I was just beginning to understand how athletic fitness differs from mainstream general fitness. And I had done my personal trainer's certification, but I realized to be able to excel in sports and sports science, you needed to do more than that. So, strength and conditioning is actually the use of systematic science based principles to improve physical performance and reduce the risk of injury. So this is how it differs from general fitness. And I said, this is what I wanted to do. At that point of time, that's what I wanted to do, work with athletes. And coming from an athletic background, I thought that was the need of the hour in India because we were still hugely reliant on strength and conditioning coaches from the West. When I first stepped
Right.
into cricket, in fact, it was really funny because the ESPN did a little story, 5 minute capsule where they said India's first Desi trainer. All the strength and conditioning and sports science advice that we got came from the West. Yet Indians have typical demographic physical patterns. And the data that we use to train our athletes were all coming from the West. And I firmly believe that we had to train Indians keeping in mind that we came from a different ethnic background and had certain specific and typical physical behavioral patterns which are born out of social habits, community habits that needed to be addressed. So we were just blindly following data that was managed in the West and was passed down. And I thought that was a glaring hole that needed to be filled up.
Right. And I think we are built very differently from the Caucasians or the Western population.
Yes. Yes, we are. We are. The physical and mentally and socially and in terms of habits as well.
So, what was it like working with the Indian cricket team in the early 2000s where were players really open to scientific training or were they all skeptical?
Well, I thought that was a time when cricket in India was changing. If you look back from the history of modern Indian cricket, Saurav Ganguly's reign has been credited to be where the maximum changes, where we really shifted gears, where India really upped the ante and became a force to reckon with in the cricket world. And that was a very interesting phase. And I went through that. And of course, that was the time of the three greats, Saurav, Sachin, and Rahul, not to forget Virendra Sehwag, and then the various Lakshmans. I saw some great, I was lucky to be almost part of history being made. And I saw the early days, could experience the early days. So it was a very rewarding kind of experience working at that time and with a new attitude that Saurav was inculcating. And one of the things that Saurav was trying to instill in the team that we are right up with the West. And I think getting an Indian to be in charge of strength and conditioning was also Saurav's way of showing the world that we didn't lag behind in any way and that we could anything that the West could do or Australia or England or South Africa could do, we could match up, if not do better. So it was really
Right.
interesting times.
How have athletes' attitudes changed towards strength and conditioning since then? Has it changed and what has changed?
Oh, hugely. Coaches and athletes used to look at the weight room as something that would make them stiff, would lead to injuries. Now they perceive strength training as one of the most important tools of injury prevention. So in this last 20 years, therapists, physiotherapists have acknowledged the role of SNC. In fact, some of them are very keen to study SNC, and that's why all over the world, you're finding more and more physiotherapists one are also SNC coaches. And they realize that's a very important link. And not understanding SNC could actually get in their way of becoming good sports physiotherapists. And it's happening across as well. A lot of SNC coaches also want to know more about corrective and clinical therapies so they become more complete professionals. So yes, there's been a total change in that attitude. They realize that the weight room is important. And it's not only in cricket, it's happening in tennis, it's happening in a game like golf, which was supposed to be really laid back and strength training was unheard of, say 25, 30 years. Yeah.
So, what inspired you to create endorphins and why the focus on corrective exercise?
Anil, the actual reason is highly personal. So when I was about 19 or 20 years, I was diagnosed with this autoimmune musculoskeletal disease, and I felt that I didn't receive the correct medical attention that could have allowed me to continue my cricket career. I just played Ranji Trophy for Bengal, and I was on the brink of what I thought and many people thought was quite a promising first class career. And I was just about 20 years old, and then I was diagnosed with this illness. And it was
Right.
a time where rheumatology was really backward in India. I couldn't think of too many rheumatologists at that time in the late 90s, in or late 80s and early 90s. Ankylosing spondylitis is really a fancy name for what is autoimmune arthritis of the spine. And at that time, I didn't realize that it could be managed and I could continue with my cricket career. So, for lack of proper medical care, I had to give up my cricket career. And I told myself that, listen, if ever I get the opportunity, I would like to create an a service, create kind of system where illnesses, injuries could be treated properly with holistic care, and that what
Right.
happened to me should not happen to another athlete. So that was the main driving force, the main motivation why I created endorphins. And as you know, endorphins is a happy hormone and the biggest natural painkiller in the body.
So, do you think a lot has changed since then in terms of access to whether in the form of information, knowledge, as well as access to treatment and access to rehabilitation, etc.? Do you think a lot has changed?
Yes and no. Like they say, the more things change, the more they remain the same. So in many ways, yeah, medical care has improved drastically. Yet when the attention to preventing disease, and that's same with musculoskeletal disease as well, is still not up there where it should be, where I feel it should be in today's day and age. So while things have changed, the physical aspect and what movement
Right.
science can do in the world of preventive medicine is still not well understood in the clinical world, and that's still a gaping hole. Of course, as you know, with rapid strides have been made and unbelievable strides have been made in curing acute diseases, but in some ways we're still behind, particularly chronic diseases or diseases that might need to be managed or that need to have an holistic approach. I think we're still behind in these areas for sure.
So, talking about prevention, WHO data shows that nearly half of Indian adults are not meeting even the recommended activity levels, making us one of the most inactive countries in the world. From your perspective, and from your experience, what would you think India, why do you think India struggles so much with movement?
It's not part of our culture. It's not
Okay.
something that the parents. I mean, look at our socio-economic state. Most parents are just happy that they are just doing enough to provide education for their children to get a job, right? Within that the stereotype jobs, play is still looked at as luxury, something you do if you have any time left over from academics. And very sadly, schools are carrying that attitude. If anything, it's got worse over the years instead of going the other way around. I mean, when
Right.
we were in school, physical activity was something that our educators, my school principal, my school headmaster thought was so important. I mean, and that is there's been a paradigm shift in that attitude. So if the children are not, if you don't inculcate in the youth, and it's never going to happen, and the parents need to change their ideology that if anything, at least they should look at play as something that is going to be an investment for health.
Right.
Anything which is done to invest in your health is priceless, right? So that
Right.
attitude that we've changed over the years, and body shapes have changed, attitude have changed. If you only have to go walk into a school and look at the way the body shapes of children, and you realize that they're in for serious trouble. It's almost
Right.
it's really a pandemic.
Pandemic, right? Feels like that. And it's true that the same report says that Indian kids get literally just 15 to 20 minutes of exercise, which
Yeah.
is far below the global average. And so, do you think that this is all because of the cultural mindset of education first, fitness later? Has that really damaged our long term health?
To have a college.
Right.
So I get to meet a lot of school principals and owners, and I tell them that you guys have got the responsibility. You should put your foot down. And some of them complain that parents get in the way. I said, listen, you must insist that my school, my rules. There are well-meaning principals. There are well-meaning school owners who say that, listen, every time we try to introduce compulsory physical activity, the parents get in the way. The parents should acknowledge that school rules have to be followed. I think parents need to change their mindset.
I hear parents often say, oh, the gym will stunt my child's growth. What's the truth? At what age should kids start structured strength training, and what should it look like?
It's really sad, and that even in today's day and age, such myths should exist. There's enough scientific literature on juvenile training that clearly says that physical activity, including strength training, when conducted under expert supervision, is going to actually help the children not only physically but also in their cognitive development. So strength training will actually help children to develop their muscle, develop their strength, and also act as an injury preventer in later years. There's enough research saying that children who have strength trained have less injuries, less debilitating injuries or musculoskeletal issues later on in their life. So and you can see that in countries like China, in Korea, in Bulgaria, who are more advanced, that children as young as 6 and 7 are learning the rudiments of weightlifting technique.
We've spoken about children, we've spoken about schools, but yet, why do so many people stop playing sports or doing any form of structured exercise after their 20s?
I think by nature, Indians are extremely job oriented, right? And once they enter a profession that and they feel that the world begins and ends in their corporate life, and employers tend to typically really drain out their employees, and it's not something that is even looked at as a CHR activity. Many companies are actually changing. They're encouraging their employees to participate in gym or other physical activities, at least recreational activities. But that old world where companies used to encourage sports, and having employees who were good in sports was considered something of a pride. Many companies really boast, really liked employees, athletes, even though they may not have been professional athletes, but just enhance the prestige of the firm. To even say, that some of the India's best golfers, or tennis players, or cricketers, and were employed. And going back in the 70s and 80s, all our cricketers were employed in corporate houses or banks or other institutions. Right. So that culture doesn't exist anymore. Research papers have said that employees who participate in physical activity are actually have increased their efficiency at work. So, if not for anything, at least for efficiency or selfish reasons, I think employers should encourage employees to participate in some kind of physical and look at the investment in health.
Right.
Anil,
Yeah. When people sign up for a gym, they typically start out with a lot of enthusiasm. But how many actually stick with it? From your experience, how often do people really turn up once they've enrolled? And why is it so hard to sustain?
Anil, other than the scientific advice, the scientific knowledge that you impart behind an exercise program, there is also a narrative that you have to build up around a client, that why that person needs to come to the gym. If
Right.
the reasons are not strong enough, then the motivation will not be strong enough. If the client, we are still stuck up, particularly the gym industry, in a very cosmetic world where a lot of people tend to think that they go to gyms to improve their physical appearance. Even in today's
Yeah.
day and age, that seems to be primary reason for
The
people
aesthetic
to
part.
visit gyms. The aesthetic part, to
Yeah.
lose weight, to look better. Nothing wrong with that if that motivates some people, but it doesn't motivate everybody. So it's
Right.
very important to find out the narrative makes a person tick. For me, I always tell people why you come to the gym to prepare for life's unforeseen contingencies, and the big pandemic being one. To be
Right.
ready for what life throws at you. You don't know what life throws. Ill health, bad times. I mean, whatever comes your way. If you go to the gym and you maintain good health, if you're healthy, you can fight anything that is thrown at you tomorrow. So that there has to be very strong narrative and motivation that I need to find my reason to come to the gym. I may be doing it for my children's future. I may be or an I want to stay healthy. I want to just be fit enough for my grandchildren. to enjoy life with them. People's motivation is different for different people.
So motivation, of course, is a critical aspect, but is it also that gyms aren't providing what people really need? Is it because of that as well?
Yes, I think gyms should be looked at as preventive health centers. So it's
Right.
not only about the movement; it's about the quality of life, quality of recovery, quality of sleep, quality of diet. That all goes into it. I think that's the missing link, and they're not getting it in the gyms. And believe me, there are not too many other institutions in our society where they can get it from, because you're not going to get it from the hospital environment.
Right.
You're not going to get preventive health. When you talk about preventive health, I'm not only talking about musculoskeletal injuries or issues, but also metabolic issues, which is rampant around
Right.
us. We are, we are in fact, in the middle of a huge metabolic epidemic. Our metabolic health is all over the place.
We're talking about stickiness and people attending gym on a regular basis. Do you see any pattern between men and women? Do men tend to stick longer or women tend? Is there any sort of correlation there?
Historically, what I've found in my practice, the women tend to be more motivated than men, unless the men come from an athletic background, a sports background, where they need to do this to increase their longevity in sports or increase the performance in sports. If it's in our general, just on general CV street, I find the women tend to be more committed to their programs and tend to stick to their programs longer than no, their
Now,
adherence is stronger with women than men.
most people think of training as just going to the gym. Can you explain what strength and conditioning actually means and how it's different from simply working out?
See, strength and conditioning goes beyond really lifting weights in incorporating activities that build endurance, speed, agility with a program tailored to your individual needs. Now, at one time, it was restricted to only people who wanted to improve their sports performance, but there's a carryover to today into general life. People want to be strong, have realized that they want to, like, once again, look better, perform better, increase their efficiency and productivity at work and the recreational, maybe um, fitness sports that they are in. One is sports specific. The second is condition, just general health and wellness. The third aspect is injury prevention. And now even physiotherapists have recognized and acknowledged that strength and conditioning is a very important aspect of rehabilitative training as well. So people who undergo surgeries, knee surgeries, shoulder surgery, back surgeries, are have to have do get best results when they also kind of encompass a strength and conditioning way of life, rather than just go to the gym and lifting weights for cosmetic
Right.
benefits. And then you just the nature of strength and conditioning is such that you inculcate sports specific training, multiple joint movements, because no single body part actually works in isolation. The whole body works synergistically to produce complex movements. So these are very integral parts of sports and conditioning, which when carried on onto general life, produce results even for general movement patterns and preventing injury, living a more active life. So there's a huge carryover from into real life.
You just mentioned about the aspect of building strength, which being so critical. Now, there's so many training styles. There's bodybuilding, powerlifting, Olympic lifting, strongman, athletic conditioning. For a layperson, what's the difference between all of them?
Sure. I'll leave bodybuilding out of this because I really don't see any function and benefit, any, other than the a consciousness about your body composition and your diet. I mean, if I would look at bodybuilding, the two things that I would take from it is the diet, because because they really eat lean to get their body composition down, provided it doesn't get to an extreme level where they're trying to drop below 5-6% body fat.
Right.
But if you just generally bodybuilders tend to eat healthy. People who just do a recreational bodybuilding, they just when I say bodybuilding, they want to have good body composition. It's not a bad thing because there's some benefits of. But strength training has other benefits. Let's just concentrate on the metabolic benefits. So we know muscle is the most important tissue for insulin sensitivity. There is
Right.
no single tissue, in the body that regulates your
Right.
insulin as much as muscle does. And if you look around you, there's pancreas hell. I mean, people talk about liver, people talk about the gut, but I think the pancreas is an extremely important organ in your body. So when you have healthy muscle, it's absolutely essential for healthy pancreas. You cannot have a healthy pancreas. Your muscles are healthy as well. So when I look at muscle, I go beyond just cosmetic, go beyond functional even to look at the metabolic benefits of muscle. So it's just one muscle is just one sitting there in your body is doing great things to your insulin sensitivity, to your entire metabolism, to ensuring that to keep you away from getting a fatty liver. So it's huge. I would want more and more people to look at muscle as nothing as something that doesn't only improve your performance on the field, but it also helps your metabolic health and prevents and plays a huge role in preventing chronic diseases, heart, blood pressure, diabetes, etc.
Yeah, and muscle, that's why it's also called the sink, the glucose sink. One of the things I keep hearing from most people is walking is an exercise. Walking is the best possible exercise. Even Gandhiji famously said that. But is walking really enough in today's context? Or are we fooling ourselves by calling daily walks as fitness?
I see walking as something beautiful. If you're going out in the open air, you're enjoying nature, you're listening to the songs of the birds, taking in, you're smelling the flowers on the way. It's lovely because um, the amount of de-stressing that you can get out of it is compares to nothing. But then again, you should have the right attitude to get these kind of benefits. If you're going out there to kill yourself and walk and use it as a physical exercise, I don't look at walking as an exercise. It's best for older people. I would look at it as an activity, but it's too uncontrolled. It's a very constructed exercise. However, I acknowledge the benefit of walking as a de-stressor, provided you have the right attitude. Again, now if your 70-year-old father or mother goes for a walk instead of instead of sitting on a couch and watching television, it would be definitely beneficial. But I wouldn't, in your 30s and 40s, it's certainly not something that I would encourage people to. You need to look at doing something more than just that.
Yes, but I think there's a lot of misconception around walking as a substitute for exercise. That's what many people
See, Anil, the
think.
thing is that most people who have mobility issues, who have tight ankles, who have poor muscle, generally muscle health, they either have tight muscle or weak muscles, developed a very poor gait technique. So when you're walking with poor gait technique and your ankles are not flexing properly, you're not being able to achieve hip extension, you're not flexing the hips properly, your scapula is not moving, so you're actually perpetuating a bad movement pattern. Now I walk into malls and in the airports and look at people walk. I mean, I cannot, even if they would do it for 5 or 6 miles, I don't think they're exercising. They're just perpetuating and repeating a really bad pattern. And when there's no quality in a repetition, it cannot be good for your body. So, if for something to be beneficial, each repetition should have quality in it. When you repeat something that has quality, you get benefit out of it. You get efficient at it. That has benefits over holistic benefits over your body. But if you're a poor walker, you walk in with bad technique, with bad form, I don't see that good for your musculoskeletal health at all. In fact, it probably leads to most injuries.
You mentioned gait. Every movement we do, whether it's running, lifting, or even standing up from a chair, has a biomechanical pattern. What do you think is the single most important movement pattern most people get wrong? And why does it matter?
See, movement should emphasize three things. Okay. It should, one is acceleration, which basically the ability to produce force. One is deceleration, the ability to actually reduce force. And the third thing is agility, change of direction. So the combination of these three, any movement system, any movement practice will have these three fundamental aspects of it. So if you spoke about gait, what are we doing? when we walk, it's basically every time we step forward, there is there's a ground reaction force. Put a foot down. If you put the force of, say, whatever it is, 5 times your body weight. I think when you're walking, you use about, when you're jogging, it's about 5 times your body weight. So that force comes back to us. The ability to then dissipate that force in your body, right, is good efficient movement. And that's why we need muscles. That's why we need strong ligaments. That's why we need strong tendons to be able to absorb ground reaction forces. When any movement practice is teaching the body or giving it the ability to handle ground reaction forces in the best possible manner, so that you can repeat it over years and years and years without causing damage or causing minimal damage to your joints.
Right. So
That's movement, good movement practice.
yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about injuries and rehab. You've trained a lot of athletes. So what sort of injuries do you see commonly among athletes, and how much of it is pure bad luck versus poor preparation or training?
But and 80% of it could be actually be to what we say poor prehab more
Right.
than rehab. I'm a big one on prehab. And what is prehab? To identify through a good scientific assessment program, you should be able to identify the red flags very early in his training career, training life. So once everybody is vulnerable to certain injuries, everybody, and you could see those dysfunctions early and identify those dysfunctions early and train in such a way that to the best possible, you can, if you're bad luck, you can still get those injuries. But you, to be an honest practitioner is one who is able to identify these red flags in the body and created then a program, a scientific training program that addresses these dysfunctions and tries in a best possible manner to ensure that they don't happen. So that's where prehab comes in. A lot of the injuries, a lot of acute pain, trauma can be prevented with good scientific training. Yet we as practitioners fail. But an honest program should inculcate that and should not miss out. Sometimes you do miss out, but at least the effort and that intention has been there to identify vehicle links, document it, perform repeated assessments to see that how well we've managed to keep these in check, just as you would do it in metabolic health. If you were vulnerable, you test once in 6 months, maybe a year, once to see how you were doing, how whether your diet, your lifestyle, your recovery, your sleep was good enough to reduce the risk or manage the risks. So a good exercise program is that which successfully manages your physical risk profile.
Right. And any form of injuries that you see more often than the others?
It's typical to sports. In football, we tend to obviously see more knee injuries, more ankle injuries. In tennis, it's usually the upper limbs much more. We have rotator cuff issues in tennis quite a bit. Again, knee, if you torso rotation is poor, we see a lot of knees. Typically, is the shoulder, knee, lower back. I mean, like in normal life, in just general population, I think lower back is the most commonly hurt and injured part of the body, followed by the knee and the shoulder, and then the ankle.
Right. And
But lower back is the big one. If you see the millions and millions of dollars and every year that are spent in rehabilitating a lower back, I think lower back is the cause for most working days lost all over the world.
yep, it is. The other injury which seems to be quite common is the Achilles tendon injuries. And they're often called the career ender as far as athletes are concerned. Why are they so common, and why does it take so long for them to heal?
So, first, why they are so common is we've completely changed our attitude to footwear. Children are being put into shoes very early in their life, and we are not allowing the intrinsic muscles of the feet and the toes. You know how important the big toe mobility is to Achilles health. Is there could be an essay written just on that. So, just to cut it short, we are not doing enough training on our feet and our ankles. There is a good reason why the largest number of nerve endings other than the eyelids are at the bottom of our feet,
Right.
because it gives feedback to us, proprioceptive feedback to us where we are in space. So we are wearing these fancy shoes very early in our life. We are not developing our feet. We don't understand how the foot works. Hence, not only Achilles, we're getting all kinds of injuries in the feet and it's increasing. The second thing is because the Achilles is probably has zero supply of blood. Is one of the tendons, it's the farthest away from the heart, and it hardly has any blood supply, and it doesn't heal. So, as you know, blood supply is extremely important for any cartilage, any tendon to heal, and these are not areas where which the blood reaches very easily. So that's why it takes such a long time. So now there are various technologies which are inducing blood, PRP, and everything, which are hastening the healing process. But it still remains it's really a career-threatening injuries.
Yeah, we spoke about athletes, but what about everyday people, office workers, weekend warriors? What kind of injuries or pain issues do you see most often?
Lower back and knee, and then followed by the shoulder and neck.
The reasons being lifestyle issues like long hours sitting, bad posture, lack of mobility, right? Would these would these be the reasons?
Yeah, long hours of sitting, really, really weak muscles in the muscles that should be strong. So the muscles that very ironic, the muscles that we need strength are getting weak and over flexible. The muscles that we need flexibility are getting short and tight. So that's what happens when with poor loading, faulty loading, inappropriate and incorrect loading when I talk about musculoskeletal loading. So these are typically all lifestyle issues. The knee, very much so with women, very much more with women than men. But we see a lot of, and I'm not talking about just the athletes. It's athletic, tend to have more injuries. But I'm talking about just general population.
Someone is in their 40s or 50s. Injuries and aches seem to creep in knees, back, shoulders. Should one take all this to be part of aging process, or is there something one can do to prevent these aches?
It's very easy to pass it off. It's also an excuse. It also like hiding behind to pass it out on age, but it's just lack of activity, lack of awareness, and just plain simple being lazy. I think people don't value their musculoskeletal health as much as they value their metabolic health. Not to say that they're doing anything about it, but the words cholesterol, the words blood pressure, diabetes are far more scary to the just general population than say a bad back or bad shoulder. Because a bad back is not going to kill you, but high cholesterol can, or they believe it can. Diabetes can kill you, blood pressure can kill you. But when you have a back pain, a knee pain, it really compromises your life in terms of the restriction it puts on your mobility. And when something restricts your mobility, indirectly it's going to cause you metabolic illness as well. If you can't move well enough and you can't move often enough, you're going to end up with chronic diseases like diabetes, like blood pressure. Right. So these are all any cardio or cardiovascular ailment. So I feel metabolic issues and musculoskeletal issues are all interlinked. There's never one without the other.
We spoke about injuries. Is it true that an injury in your 40s or 50s can affect you for the next 20 years or even the rest of your life simply because recovery takes so much longer?
If it's been ignored for a long time, injuries tend to get chronic, but there's no reason why if with proper scientific and care, it's chronic injuries can be managed. But Anil, what I see is once people recover or they think they recovered because they've just out of the acute attack, they tend to ignore it and they don't come back until it flares up again. After your 40s, if you've had an acute attack of say back pain or shoulder pain or whatever, and you then become pain free, it doesn't mean that you're good for life. You need to come back just as you would send your car for servicing, and you wouldn't wait for your car to break down before sending it for servicing. You need to send your body for servicing as well. And I'm
Right.
always say you should visit a physiotherapist, not for pain management, but to improve the quality of your life. And I think the quality of your movement dictates the quality of your life. So, like you said, after 40, it's difficult and to manage it, but it can be done, provided you treat it with the urgency, you treat it with the consistency and the serious attention that it deserves. If
I see so many people, when they talk about managing, they look at managing using a pill versus a form of physical way in which they can recuperate or recover. So, what do you have to say to that?
so, I think that's the easy way out. And people always want to reach out for immediate wellness rather than long term wellness. But you have to understand that when you're taking a pill, you're opening yourselves for other issues like you've got inflammation in the body, and but you take an NSAID, an non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, and you're over a period of time you just ruin your gut, and then you open yourself to more inflammation, more pain. So it's you just be stuck in that vicious cycle. So the only way out through pain management is through lifestyle changes, through dietary changes, or through exercise.
And if somebody in their 40s, 50s, even 60s decides to go to the gym, get physical fitness, and decide to train hard, what should they be careful about and what is worth pushing through?
Look, I would always say if you're starting late in life, you must have expert advice. You must have really the best possible training that you can afford to get with you, who will guide you, who will understand your body, who's going to hold your hand and take you through it and help you decide what is worth going for and what is not. So for example, I always say I use the word optimum strength. Like for your life, for your activity, for your sport, there is always an optimum strength level that exists. I mean, there is no point training beyond the optimum because there's a price to pay for it.
Right.
Okay, so I believe for a tennis player, I mean, if you're deadlifting 90 kilos or 95 kilos, there are benefits pushing it to 100 or maybe 105. But I don't see any benefit that an athlete would get pushing him beyond 105. So then the scale kind of tips over. That kind of strength has a price to pay. Tissue injury, the risk, and that risk is not worth taking. You should always weigh in the reward and risk before you push yourself. An expert coach will always be able to tell you that. And that
Right.
becomes all the more important when you're starting at a later age and understand what is relevant for your life, your lifestyle, your needs. I mean, you don't have to start an Olympic lifting program at age 60. You can do safe, effective strength training and reap all the benefits of that without really wanting to get into Olympic lifting. In fact, so just understanding that, acknowledging that, and appreciating your boundaries is the way to have a safe and effective program, which you can really do well into your golden years. People who are in their 80s who are still strength training.
So one needs to be aware of risk reward ratio.
Absolutely. Yeah. Know how much to push and understand and acknowledge that beyond a certain level, you're not going to get much benefit pushing yourself.
Talking about pushing, squats are often called the king of exercise. But if someone was having severe knee pain, are squats safe for them? And what modifications should they be doing? Like, is it goblet squats, split squats, or step ups? Do they actually work?
See, I've helped many people understand that what is knee pain and what is the site of the pain and what is the source of the pain. Many people suffer from knee pain, but the problem is not the knee. The problem could be elsewhere. It could be in the ankles, it could be in the hips. The manifestation could be the knee. So the knee is merely the site of the pain, it is not the source of the pain. In subjects like that, I would slowly open up the restriction and the ankle and the hips and encourage them to squat. But if there is a pathological issue at the site of the knee, then one has to be very, very careful when encouraging somebody to squat deep. Because for me, a squat means a deep squat. It's where your glutes are very, very close to the ground, because that is the way nature intended us to squat. But there are other options. So I have got a lot of results and benefits from making people do a Swiss ball squat against the wall with a Swiss ball behind them. That has helped a lot of people with knee pain manage it. Spanish squats. So there are other variations of squat that one could teach. You know, the beauty of a good exercise is that it can always be regressed and progressed. So
Right.
there are many forms of squats, many avatars of the squat. So you can go up the difficulty ladder or down. Like I said, yes, I agree that the squat is probably the most primal of all our movements for reasons I've cited earlier, and it's a big buck, it's a big bang exercise. So again, like as I use the word manage, you can manage your knee pain and derive the benefits of squats without worsening the condition in your knee.
Are unilateral movements like single leg squats, lunges, or single leg presses more safer and more effective than bilateral lifts?
Good question. I think both are important, but if you from a sports point of view, um, unilateral movements are very, very, very important, because if you look at, see, in any sport, which is particularly a running sport, you're really on one leg most of the time. We don't realize it, but what is running? Shifting from one leg to the other. So you're shifting from mobility to stability, stability to mobility, but really you're shifting from your efficiency. So if you look at a running video and spend the number, how much of time you spend on one leg, you'll be amazed to find how much efficiency on one leg is important for sport. Most
Right.
sports skills are initiated by applying force in the ground, one leg or two. So, but if you look at the shift offs in sports, efficiency on one leg is extremely important. Now, coming to older people, a lot of them slip and fall because of poor efficiency on one leg. Our proprioceptive senses tend to decline when we are on one leg. So every time we are climbing steps or getting down from the steps or shifting our weight for that momentary second or millisecond, we are actually on one leg. And the more force an athlete, a normal person, can apply against the ground, the faster they will accelerate, the higher they will jump, and more effective they will be in sport and in real life. So the training on one leg, I wouldn't say that training one leg is more important than training on both legs, but it's indispensable. It's extremely important, a mandatory almost for athletes or even general population to train on one leg. We make older populations spend a lot of time doing step ups, lunges where they increase their efficiency on one leg.
At least from research, and what's fascinating for me is the fact that unilateral movements seem to have more strength when you combine versus a bilateral movement.
Yes. Yes. And you can address the weaker link because
Right.
we humans bipedals, we tend to be stronger on one leg and then the other, even with the upper body. So when you're training, you're developing strength in each leg separately. In fact, I sometimes tend to do one extra set on the weaker side. So one that has been injured. So if you're doing three sets, so we do one extra set on the one side. So you have the luxury of doing that when you're doing unilateral movements. That way, unilateral movements are probably more important than bilateral because it gives you the opportunity to train to correct the weaker link.
Now, the spine is at the center of almost every movement we make. How do you teach people to protect their spine while still including strength, especially with loaded movements like deadlifts and presses?
So the spine is the chassis of the human body. What it is important to understand about the spine is that why the erector spine runs along this two sides.
Right.
Okay. And then we have several intrinsic muscles. The closest muscle to the spine is the multifidus. So from this side. But what is important to understand and respect, and absolutely at the core of understanding how the spine moves, the erector spina doesn't behave in the same manner at all the segments in the spine. So this is the lumbar spine that you can see. So the job of the erector spina is to extend the torso. Extension is when and so flexion is when where the vertebrae come. So there's a flexing and this is extension. So if you look at a natural spine, right? Okay, sorry. So this is flexion and this is an
Right.
extension. I got it the other
Right.
way around. So this is the lumbar spine. Okay? You can see the vertebra as a facet joint. Now this is the lumbar spine. There's a natural extension in the lumbar spine, which we call the lordosis. So all the muscles around here, the lumbar erectors, are tonic in nature. And I repeat this, they are tonic in nature. They don't fatigue. So they underfall slowly. They tend to become short and tight. The job of the lumbar spine is stability, not mobility. So teaching the brain, teaching the body how to keep a stable lumbar spine is very important. So I see a lot of exercises when people tend to extend the lumbar spine. In fact, in yoga, you're encouraged to do a lot of movements where the lumbar spines get into hyperextension. But I always say that the lumbar spine is not meant for mobility, it's meant for stability. So understanding that and remembering that in all movements is particularly one. So when you're lifting overhead or when you're and because it connects to our limbs, how the limbs behave and how the movement in the limbs will affect the lumbar is extremely important. Now, if you then you go above, and then that's the thoracic spine. So the thoracic spine, the natural shape of the thoracic spine is the opposite. It's kyphotic. So with age, with bad training, the thoracic spine tends to get
Kyphotic. Yeah.
more kyphotic. So the nature of the muscles around the thoracic spine are the opposite. They are meant for mobility and not stability. So he has a stable joint and he has a mobile joint. Yet you go to the gym, you'll find people doing exercise with the opposite. They tend to use their lower body a lot. You see a lot of mobility in this area, and you'll see absolute stiffness in the upper area. So
Right.
that is the way they go. That is because false loading, bad loading will take you that way. So once you understand that right from the beginning and treat them, these two areas, the way they need to, then that'll keep a lot of issues with the spine away. So, and then we go to lower cervical spine, which is again meant for stability. So you've got stability, mobility, stability, and then the upper cervical is meant for mobility. So it should be stable, mobile, stable, mobile. Yet people do not respect these principles. People do not respect the nature of these muscles, and that's why the spine creates so much of issues. And when the spine doesn't work normally, all the limbs, the appendages, so to speak, that attach to it, you can have injuries in the distal joints, like I said. If your proximal is not stable enough, if the mobile joints are not mobile enough, the stable joints are not stable enough, and we reverse the roles, you will see injuries in the distal joints.
Right.
You can hurt an ankle, you can hurt the knee, you can hurt other distal joints because of poor functioning in the spine.
So, is there a right way to run, jump, or land, or is movement highly individual depending on the anatomy?
Anil, the length, your limb length, where the tendons attach, will differ from person to person. So there is going to be 5 to 10% variation in across population. Having said that, there are certain principles that need to be respected. So when you jump and you land, how your feet, your knee, or if you look at it from a skyline view, or the center of the patella should be somewhere between the third and the second toe. They should not cave in. These are standard, but they also cave in because of weakness in the kinetic chain, weakness in some muscles, which need to be identified in the first place. So, but these are the basic fundamentals for when you land, that the weight is distributed in the midfoot and you don't topple over, you shouldn't be on your heels. So that you'll see across population, across all good athletes, the way they land, the way they. So while again with running, there are 5 to 10% there you will see changes in the styles, but certain fundamentals will remain the same. The force, how they hit the ground. At most runners, you will see that their heel will go right up to the rub butt, and there's no restriction in mobility. You'll see a high new drive. You'll see tremendous force in the stride. So these are all fundamentals of good running technique. But
Right.
there'll be 5 to 10% difference in every battle.
So, in corrective exercise, there's talk of alignment, posture. How much of small changes like foot position, hip tilt, or even shoulder mobility influence performance and injury risk?
Hugely. See, changes when injuries happen, anyway, are going to be very, very little. A 1 degree change, 1 degree change in the joint position is huge. 1 degree change in the joint position can lead to, at the distal joints, a change of number 4 to 5 degrees. Just being able to change that by altering the length of the muscles, the tightness in the muscles, the stiffness in the muscles. If you can change the way the joint performs, you can go a long way in preventing injuries. It's yes, correct. It's a huge impact. Just there.
Core training. Core training is often reduced to crunches and planks, which I see so often in the gym. From a biomechanics standpoint, what does the core actually do and how should we be training it?
So, Anil, I spoke about the stable joint and mobile joint. The role of the joints that by inherent needs to be stable. Like, for example, I mentioned the lumbar spine. So, the lumbar spine is meant to be stable while rotation takes place above it and below it. So, when we talk about core muscles for the spine, so all the muscles around the lump, which means turning around, the deepest abdominal muscles are the transverse abdominis. So the transverse abdominis runs this way, transverse, as the name suggests. They attach first to the external oblique, then the internal oblique, and through the thoracolumbar fascia, they attach to the spine through a muscle called the multifidus. This entire unit, the job of the entire unit is to keep these stable. So we typically refer to these muscles as the core muscles that keep the lumbar stable so that the hips can rotate. So the hips, the hips are meant for mobility. Um, so when we talk about hip stability, it's a very incorrect expression because hips are not supposed to be stable. They need to be mobile. So we refer, when we talk about the hip stability, what we actually say is everything above it and below it should be stable so that the hips are free to rotate. So the muscles that keep you stable in the torso are the ones that are typically the core muscles, and which is, like I said, the transverse abdominis, the multifidus, and which is the deepest muscle. So typically core exercise should be such which challenge the stability of the lower, while movement should occur in the other parts of the body. So the plank is, of course, a very basic core exercise, but I like to challenge my athletes or challenge my subject with exercise where they have to move the mobile parts while the stable parts remain quiet. That's the real function, that the quiet parts need to remain quiet while movement should. So if you're just keeping somebody still like a mannequin, which really a plank is, you're keeping the entire body stable. So that's not really a challenge because the mobile parts are also, yeah, the mobile parts have to move and the stable parts have to remain stable. That's the function of the core.
So, what would be some of the, I think a lot of people spend a lot of time doing crunches by the hundreds.
Just one simple thing about the crunches. That's crunches, when you work in the crunches, it really actually refers to the rectus abdominis, which we tend to call the six pack, which attach somewhere here at the bottom of the sternum, and then to your pelvis.
Right.
Every time you crunch in, you're shortening this muscle. Right. And if you do it often enough, you tend to get that flex crunch posture, which tend to pull the shoulders in, tightens your chest, and this is what you start looking at.
Right.
Yeah, we don't want that. We want to open you up. We want to increase your lung capacity. We want to let the diaphragm go. So any movement that gets you inside, which is adducted, adducted, flex, internally rotated, I do not encourage, because that needs to poor functions, poor metabolic functions, poor musculoskeletal functions, poor tidal functions, and should be discouraged.
So probably all the gym instructors should be taught this. What about breathing? How important is breathing when it comes to alignment and even preventing injuries before they happen?
So we teach a proper breathing pattern when clients come in, which is, we breathing through the diaphragm. So every time you inhale, the belly should come up. We test that. And every time you exhale, the belly should go down. Many people have a reverse breathing pattern. And because of, like I just mentioned, tight chest muscles, the tight superficial muscles, really. So this is one which is particularly in men, the upper traps, which is really worshipped in the cosmetic world, traps. So when you have a tight, overdeveloped traps, you have overdeveloped latissimus, overdeveloped chest, it needs to compromise your breathing cycle, because one breathing cycle starts at the diaphragm and ends here. If you have overdeveloped, shortened chest muscle, it tends to kind of steal, it tends to sort of hijack a breathing cycle and starts operating too early. So the upper respiratory muscles should only fire in the last 1/3 of the breathing cycle. When they start firing early, it compromises your tidal volume. It compromises the amount of oxygen that you can put in one breath cycle. Now, if you look at oxygen as the prana and as the life force, you are actually delivering less oxygen to your muscles in every breath. And if you breathe X many times in a minute, in an hour, in a day, then you're actually short charging your organs. You're actually taking life force away. You're reducing your longevity. That's how important breathing is. So one of the first things you teach your clients to do, most people are breathing poorly even when they're not exercising. So when they exercise, it worsens the breathing cycle. And if you put them on a typical popular gym exercise program, it will shorten the muscles that actually have caused poor breathing patterns in the first place.
What's the difference between rehab and just resting until the pain goes away?
That's one of the things, that when you have pain, and I'll say this, rest is the worst possible thing. That, however, doesn't mean that you take the tissue, you take the body part that is injured and you stress it. But remember, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So there's that right amount of load, which when you put on an injured tissue, actually helps it to heal. You get that load wrong, and then you're going to injure it. But
Right.
no tissue heals with rest. So when you want to leave that tissue alone when it's going through the active inflammatory stage. But once it's crossed the active inflammatory stage, you need to move the muscles around it. You need to move the tissues around it so that the scar tissue is formed in a proper disciplined manner and the healing process is accelerated. So when people get injured and doctors or specialists tell them to take bed rest, I think it's very irresponsible advice. You put a 60-year-old man in a bed for 3 days, you've already taken 10 days away from his life because it's going to compromise his vital capacities. It's going to really work negatively on his lung capacity, and just for a 60-year-old person to be in bed in 3 days, you already taken away so much from his body. So there are many ways to rest that body part and work around it, make the other muscles stronger so that the healing process is hastened. Particularly unless back pain is really, really serious or that demands surgery. For example, not only back pain, any pain. So resting beyond 3 days is unnecessary. In fact, is counterproductive.
More so in the seniors because they also have the issue
More
of
so,
muscle loss.
absolutely right. Yeah, we have to be very careful when we advise senior population to rest. Because it can have disastrous consequences on their health and wellness.
Right. Talking about progression, in your approach, what's the role of progressive loading, knowing when to push and when to hold back during a rehab?
So that's why rehab should always be conducted with expert professionals who can assess muscle strength on a daily basis when it is during the recovery phase. And once that muscle has adapted itself to the stress that you've put yesterday, so you load a muscle, you stress a muscle, and at rest and recovery, the muscle grows stronger. Even an injured muscle, because it's not the way to recover. Once it's got used to that, you've got to progress. You've got to increasing the load. Otherwise, that muscle will not improve any further.
Right.
So that's at the final stage of rehab pattern. You have to load a muscle. You have to test the muscle to see whether it is ready for life. It's ready for what activities that is going to be subjected to in future. So progressive overload is an extremely important part of muscle recovery, or with just getting stronger and also improving your performance.
You've spoken about corrective exercise. Can you explain how this approach addresses root causes of injury rather than just treating the symptoms?
So unless there's a congenital illness, unless there's a congenital dysfunction which the patient has really inherited at birth, 80%, also 90% of the injuries because of certain dysfunctions, certain musculoskeletal dysfunctions, and by dysfunctions I mean muscle imbalances. So whether the muscle imbalance caused a joint deviation, or whether the joint misalignment cause the muscle imbalance, it doesn't matter because the treatment is the same. You've got to stretch the muscle on one side of the joint, mobilize the joint, strengthen the muscle on the other side of the joint. So, yeah. So, unless it's congenital, you can identify very much the reason for the injury and get working with it.
What are the most common issues you see in regular people who walk into your studio? Is it bad posture, lower back pain, weak core, tight shoulders? What exactly is more common?
Bad posture is not the reason, but the ultimate is the effect of when we see a bad posture, it's because of certain other factors. Some dysfunctions exist, some imbalances exist, right? So it's posture is really only the outcome. So we do proper scanning to understand where it comes from. So it's almost like looking at the body in isolation and looking at each joint by joint, and understanding what the dysfunction. And when we start, we put a strategy in place. When we start it, we again then look at joint by joint, and hopefully by the time we come to the integrating the movement, the posture has sorted itself out. Not because we've really gone for correct your posture, correct your posture, correct your posture. We've left that aside and just looked at the dysfunctions or the imbalances and worked at it in isolation. And then finally, the integrated product looked really good.
So, how do you measure progress in corrective exercise? Is it about pain reduction, movement, efficiency, or something else?
Pain reduction and the feedback from the client is very important. That has to be the ultimate proof of the pudding, how the client is feeling. But many a time, a client has been asymptomatic. He doesn't really come to us with pains, but he's just with general not feeling well. I don't feel so active, or my joints don't feel great, or I feel sticky. And then they report that they felt better, they move better, they go through all the day's activities, daily activities better, or if they are participating in sport, they feel that they're suddenly moving better on court, on the field. And yeah, so over a period, we get feedback, and we also see visual feedback. We see more movement efficiency when we prescribe an exercise that the subjects that has performed earlier, say a few months back, and we see now, and there's really is chalk and cheese because they're moving with more confidence, with more surety. Their proprioceptive sense has improved, how they're planting their foot, rotating their bodies, and everything. Everything kind of looks better.
How do you measure corrective exercise?
So if joints can always be measured. When we measure flexibility around a joint for every joint. We start, okay, so ankle dorsiflexion should be 16 to 22 degrees. It's only 14 degrees now. And you can use a goniometer. Simple. Using a goniometer is very easy. So we use a goniometer to measure flexibility on each joint. So then we move to the next all the mobile joints. So we go to the hip and we measure hip flexion. And it's about, for a senior person, while we say about 120 in one hip, one leg, 110 in both would be normal, but we are okay with the senior population with about 110. And when we see over 3 months or 4 months period, we measure it again, and there's been a 3 to 4 degrees improvement. So that's actually, we can see that. That's proof. That's physical proof that.
Right.
But which is almost always comes with a feeling better. The client himself or herself reports that, oh, so if dorsiflexion can improve by 2 degrees, the client will feel walking much more comfortable,
Wow.
far more fluid. They'll say, oh, we feel so much better walking now. Or I don't get tired after one kilometer, which I used to, because where the ankle is moving better, covering. So when the ankle as dorsiflexion improved by 2 degrees, a range of motion increase, it can create much better torque. You're propelling the ankle is propelling you, creating a propulsive force that's throwing you forward with far less effort. So you start feeling, better. Simple activities like walking gets easier. And when you have the hip also improved in mobility, that makes you feel even more comfortable. If you're
Right.
if you're more stable now on the lumbar spine, and your thoracic spine is opening up better, and your scapula is working better, your shoulders are swinging better, then your whole walking experience becomes so much more pleasurable. I mean, just to speak of walking, but there are other things that people do, like carrying the grocery, taking things out of the car, loading a trunk, a suitcase. I mean, there's so many other things, carrying weights around the house. I had a client who was very much into gardening, and every day had to about lift 20 or 30 flower pots, put it in, put it out. So that person reported, earlier I used to find picking up flower pots and placing them in the correct place quite an activity. Now I can do it like a breeze. So that itself says that, the exercise program has really worked for this individual.
So it's fairly obvious today that, especially after listening to you, corrective exercise is a necessity. It's not a luxury. Yet, why do so few gyms offer this? Or probably most of them don't even know about it.
Because sometimes, just like functional training, corrective exercise also tends to be abused. People, it's like a double-edged sword in the hands of people who don't have more holistic viewpoint, and they then tend to get extremely orthodox about it. Oh, this is wrong. Oh, this is, or this is not the way it should be. You have to respect that all human beings can't be the same, that there will be deviations, there will be certain imbalances that are typical, that are to that person, yet have a real balanced viewpoint towards corrective exercise. Corrective exercise is not a tool in your hands to try to change the way, but to introduce a little bit of change that the body can accept and take to improve the person's quality of life. So once that's one of the reasons why people tend to be a little. I know a lot of SNC coaches tend to not have so much respect for corrective exercise or belief in it, because they feel, it's they haven't really bought into it. And also not a lot of people. So corrective exercise today is actually a certification course. It's
Right.
not something that you can just flirt with. You have to understand and it's get into the depths of it and truly understand what it means. It's not something that is only nitpicking or finger pointing or saying, "Oh, we are superior because we." It's really very basic, and we are actually using it in all forms of exercise. Correct, correction or improving, or let's say improvement.
Where do you think corrective exercise and strength and conditioning will be in India, let's say 10 years from now? Will it be finally mainstream?
Absolutely. I think now, when I first came into SNC, injury prevention and corrective exercise was not a part of SNC. It is increasingly becoming more a part of SNC. And I see SNC becoming increasingly more a very integral part of fitness training because people don't want to go into the gym and look like a beefcake. They want to go to the gym to move better, to feel better, to feel stronger. And that trend is happening. I can see the change over the last 20 years of my career.
If there is a young trainer who's listening to this right now, what would be your advice to him?
So I think there are two things. Why when you want to be a top class trainer, there are two things. Firstly, you've got to be academic, and that's where education. It's not difficult to find academic prowess and physical prowess in the same individuals. That's why, Anil, so few stand out and become exceptional in this line. And if you could in India, if you could take the names of top 5 trainers, if you have to think a bit, but you will see what is common across these top five trainers is both that these persons have got both, that they have their academics, they're plus plus, and yet they're really really physical specimens. So my advice for the young trainer is that you've got to find a way to walk your talk, which means everything that you read in the books you should be able to do yourself, and that's the ideal combination to walk the talk. Be inculcate the principles what you read and imbibe it among in yourself. Know the way, go the way, and show the way.
So, as we are nearing the end of the conversation, we have a little tradition here on Brighter 100. We like to finish with 3 quick questions that reveal the person behind the expertise. Are you ready to dive in?
Yes.
So, if you could put one message about strength and movement on billboards across the country, what would it be?
Move often and
Okay.
move well.
Move often and move well. Okay. What's the one daily habit that you never compromise on?
Get up early. Get up early before get up with the sun. And this itself, Anil, is a huge topic. Why it's important to rise up with the sun. Why it's important to get to bed early.
And especially with the circadian rhythm.
Absolutely, yeah. But I've actually done lectures on just on the circadian rhythm, and this is something that my dad inculcated in me.
We'll do another session on this. If you could train or have dinner with any coach, athlete, or scientist, past or present, who would it be and why?
Athlete, the greatest, I think, the greatest living athlete in our times, in my opinion, is Djokovic. Yeah, and because I'm a cricketer, and the cricketer I've most admired is Imran Khan, and because he's is more than just a cricketer. So these two people, and if I and my mentor, anytime I would somebody I really looked up in the world of SNC, that's Paul Check. So these three people.
Right. Djokovic
Quite not.
because of his
I
focus on
think he's
strength.
I would put him, when you talk about athletes, I would put him above Ronaldo because battling with the whole team, football is played with, and battling alone on court are two completely different things, in my opinion. You know, and if you follow his career, his scale, his fitness level, his absolute dedication to make himself the best in the world is something that is fascinating. Is absolute to me. It's just out of the world.
As a final takeaway, if there's one thing you want every listener to do today and start reclaiming their strength and movement, what would it be?
So it would always be like we Czech institutes. That's Paul Czech Institute. We are taught to and to follow the 4 doctors. And I want to leave the 4 doctors message, which is in life, the 4 doctors that you really need is Doctor Diet, Doctor Happiness. Doctor Happiness is to be, our what our Eastern philosophy teaches us. So Dr. Diet, Dr. Happiness, Dr. Quiet. When I say Dr. Quiet, it means your books, your meditation, your solitary time, even your music. And finally, if you have all three doctors in place, there's one doctor that'll take you is Dr. Movement.
Okay.
So these are four doctors. But if you don't have the first three doctors in place, Dr. Movement will kill you. So
Right.
this is what is very central to the Czech philosophy. And I wanted to end this with sharing this Czech philosophy for everybody.
So you need the four doctor or the doctor quartet with you. Ranadeep, thank you for bringing such clarity and passion to this conversation. You reminded us that strength and movement aren't just about performance or aesthetics. They are the foundation of our health, our confidence, and our independence. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil. Lovely speaking to you. And yeah, look forward to more interaction in the future outside here with you. Lovely.
Right.
It was
Thank you.
fantastic.
To our listeners, India may be facing a movement crisis, but each of us has the power to change that story. Start small, stay consistent, and remember that every step, every rep, every stretch is an investment into your future health span. Until next time on Brighter 100, stay curious, stay strong, and keep moving.